Hello, and welcome to another episode of Rights for Women. It is, what day is it? I never know. It is Tuesday, the 15th of October. I've been deep in editing land, getting my third and final book in the Blackwater Lake trilogy off to my editor. She's got most of it. She still will be getting a little bit more of it today after I finish recording this interview, and I'll tell you all about my guest in a moment. First of all, massive shout out to everybody who is playing along on Substack. The Rights for Women Substack is just coming along in leaps and bounds. I'm getting so many great comments and interactions and feedbacks over there. And just a reminder that you can join on Substack as a free subscriber. You can also support the podcast for a small amount each month, which also gives you some great bonuses, which you can find over on the Substack app at rightsforwomen.substack.com, I think. Anyway, the link's in the bio, in the show notes. What else is happening? I didn't have an episode last week because editing, but hopefully I am enough through that now that I'm going to be able to get back to the weekly regular episodes. And with the fantastic help of Annie Bucknell, my VA, who is just doing great things for the podcast. So shout out to Annie as well. Also, just a quick mention that you can now get my Turn Up the Tension online course at a super discounted rate of $199 for the 8 modules. There is hours and hours of work in that, and it is really all about taking your writing to the next level. So if you are interested in a self-paced course with loads of resources and examples and access to me, which even though I'm not doing any face-to-face tutoring in this course, you will see me in a little corner at the bottom talking through all the slides. You can email me at any time if there are any issues or anything you want to chat about as you're doing the course. So that's available now at pamelacook.com.au. Turn Up the Tension online. Jump in and grab that if you are interested in doing it, because once I get through these edits by the end of this month, I am really thinking about restructuring that, and the price will be bumped back up again. Some more exciting news. I have fixed a date for next year's Next Level Writing Retreat. It's going to be at Currawina House in the beautiful foothills of the Blue Mountains at Currajong, where we had this year's, and this year's was just amazing. I've got some great feedback from all of the 12 fantastic women who attended that. And that has spurred me on to do it again next year. So it's going to be April 10 to 13. It'll be a Thursday night evening to a Sunday afternoon at Currajong 2025, April 10 to 13. I haven't actually had time to get all the details about that up on the website, but if you are interested, there is an expression of interest form there that you can complete. And if you fill in that form, I get a notification, and anybody who has completed that email form, I will give you advance notice before I actually put the retreat up on the website and let everyone know about it, because it did sell out really quickly this year. That is happening. Exciting. Another thing I wanted to tell you about before I get on to talking to our guest today is Annie has put together a listenership survey. We're really keen to find out what it is you're loving about Rights for Women, what you'd like to see more of, if there's anything you'd like to see hear less of, suggestions for tightening up the episodes, making them shorter, longer, whatever. We really want to get your feedback. So if you are a listener, whether that be regular, occasional, or somewhere in between, we would love you to complete the listenership survey, which is going to be going out. I'm going to email that to everybody on Substack. It'll be on Instagram, and it will also be on Facebook, so where you can access the link. There is going to be a book pack up for grabs. Everybody who completes the survey will be in the draw for that. And I'm really hoping that we can get some great feedback and take Rights for Women to even bigger and better places. Now, today's guest is someone a little bit different for Rights for Women. It's a non-fiction author, the author of a book called Women Rising. If you're looking on YouTube, you'll see this fantastically gorgeous cover. And the author is Megan Dalla-Camina. Now, I actually came across this book on Instagram. Megan is with the same agency as me, Key People Literary Management. So I saw Lou Johnson, Megan's agent from Key People, posting about this book, and I thought, oh, that looks like my cup of tea. Anything about women's empowerment, women's voices, authenticity is right up my alley. That's what Rights for Women is all about. So I contacted Lou, who contacted Megan, and today she is coming on to chat about Women Rising, the book, and also about this whole idea of women's empowerment. And that's something that is so important to all of us. There's a whole lot to talk about. And just a little heads up, I am from this point on doing a little bit of an additional interview. There'll be a couple of extra questions that are going to go out to my Substack paid subscribers. So that's something additional that hasn't been added to the bonuses there, but will be added very soon. So looking forward to that. Let me tell you a little bit about Megan. I'm actually taking this from the back of the book. On the website, the Women Rising website, there is so much information about Megan and it's all amazing, but she is such an accomplished person, author, speaker, entrepreneur. It's very hard to narrow it down. So I came across this short bio in the back of her book, which I think really captures everything that's Megan's about. Megan Dalla-Camina is a renowned expert in women's leadership and empowerment with decades of experience as a Fortune 500 executive and deep academic credentials. She is the visionary founder of the award-winning Women Rising Leadership Program, which has empowered thousands of women and male allies in more than 60 countries. Megan fuses science, spirit, and practical tools to help women step into their power and achieve holistic success on their own terms. Her transformative work has been featured in major media outlets globally, inspiring women to lead with authenticity and purpose. And that is just such a great summary after having read the book. And this is a book that I am going to definitely be diving back into because I've had an overview of it, I've read it, but there are so many great exercises and things to think about in here, and a lot that actually pertain to us as writers as well as women and as women writers. So I'm really looking forward to chatting to Megan about all of that. Okay, Megan Dalla-Camina, welcome to the Rights for Women Convo Couch. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks, Pamela. I'm so excited for our conversation.
Yes, I was just telling listeners in the intro that I came across your book, Women Rising, on Instagram. We're with the same literary agency, as it turns out, Key People Literary Management. And I saw that Lou had posted about your book, I think at the launch, it probably was, and about the book coming out. And it immediately grabbed me because A, gorgeous cover, and B, just the title, Women Rising. Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's very exciting. She's so beautiful. The cover's so beautiful as well. So thank you.
Yeah. Did you have any input into the cover? Was that kind of presented to you and do you love it?
It was a beautiful collaboration, actually. Design is very important to me and like beauty and how things are. And Wiley were amazing, which is quite rare in publishing. I did it on my last book as well, Simple, Soulful, Sacred with Hay House. We had this beautiful collaboration because I had a really clear vision. And this one with Wiley, yeah, they were amazing. And we just collaborated and put all of our visions in until we landed on that.
The colours are just gorgeous. They've done such a beautiful job on the book. Now, Megan, reading your bio, it became immediately apparent that you are a woman of action, passion, commitment, and a whole lot of other adjectives that I could include there, but particularly obviously in the area of women's issues, women's empowerment, helping women find their voice. Where do you think that drive has come from? Is it something that you've had, do you think, with you all your life from childhood, that kind of drive to raise people up and to raise women's voices? Could you talk a little bit about where you think that drive has come from?
Look, it's such an interesting question. And drive, I think we can talk about the women's drive separately, but drive to get things done. And it's a blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah.
If you've read any of the archetypes, like I'm the overachiever, like that's my archetype for my inner critic and just me in general. I don't know where it's come from, but it's always been with me. Like even as a child, I was a dancer, I was an actress, and I was always performing and in a Stedfords and doing all of the things. Maybe less so in my teenage years when I went through a real rebel phase and I really didn't care much about any of that. From early in my career, yeah, I've had this sense of drive. And it's really about a drive for making a difference. The women's piece came later, but for me, it's always been just this inherent wanting to make a difference. And whether that was through early days in writing or performing and then corporate and then all of the women's work about 15 years ago.
So that kind of almost innate drive that you've had. You've channeled that into your interest in women's empowerment. So did that kind of more specific interest come about through your work and your career in the corporate world?
It did. It's funny when you look back on your life and you start to pull the thread, how you can see pieces that you may not have thought were connected, but were connected. When I was 21, I got chronic fatigue syndrome long, like decades before they really knew what it was. And I was in bed for 6 months. I was incredibly sick. And that was a transformative time for many reasons. But coming out of that, I was gifted a book, A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. It was her first book. And that book just changed me on a very profound level. And her second book, A Woman's Worth, was like a catalyst for me. And it would take another 15 years for that spark. I really felt something in that book to really catch flame in my corporate career when I was at IBM. But that it was there. It was like that kindling that had been put together from reading Marianne's work. And then, yeah, like when I hit IBM, I ended up at IBM through acquisition. I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers Consulting. And again, in very formative years, at 29, I made director at PwC on a Thursday, started my first master's degree on the Friday and found out I was pregnant on the Saturday.
Oh, wow.
Through this period of doing all the things, then became a single mother 18 months later. So by the time I hit 34 and started my executive career at IBM, all of these different facets of being a woman and how challenging it is to be a woman and a mother and a single mother and like all of that, an executive and a young executive. And then I burnt out really badly and it just blew up into this. There has to be a better way of doing this for women.
Yeah.
There has to be a better way of doing work we're passionate about and raising our families and being well and healthy and not just running on this endless treadmill that we can't stop, that we don't want to pause because we think we're going to fall off. That around 33, 34 for me, it's 20 years ago, more, I'm 54, was really that spark. First for me, like, how do I do this better? How do I live my life better and work better and parent better and be healthy? Because I wasn't. And then just so passionate about being with women, being around women, talking to women, not even supporting women at that stage. It was just like, I want this feminine energy because I'd been in masculine energy so overly corrected for so long. So that's really where it started. And then it just, I want more and I want more and I want more. Like, what are those next breadcrumbs on the path?
Oh, so interesting. I'm a bit older than you, so I was a high school teacher, but I was definitely in the 80s and 90s in that period where, oh, you can have it all. We can have it all. And it took me a while to work out you can have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time. Not if you want to stay sane. That was the conclusion I came to with my kind of work-life balance back then. I wasn't writing at that stage.
Yeah.
Do you think that kind of philosophy, I guess, that was part of feminism back in that period, how do you think that has morphed today? And how do you think it is that women can navigate that idea that we want all these things? We want the family, we want the career, we want to stay sane and to have connections and spirituality and all of those things. How do you think that has evolved to the point where we are now? Do you think things are better? Or I know from reading the book that you still feel like we've got a long way to go, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, my first book was called Getting Real About Having It All. Like, it was, we stop having this conversation that just puts women in this bind that we can never get out of, and a conversation that we never have with men. So we were going to do a whole podcast on just that one line. It's interesting. I was on another podcast a couple of weeks ago with two women in their 30s, and we were having this exact conversation. And I don't think it's changed. I think that pressure, and this is what I write about in Women Rising, about the paradoxes of power, that still these forces outside of ourselves that hold us back, that stem from the patriarchy. We're still living in a patriarchal world. We're not a post-patriarchal society. So I think so many of those challenges, so many of those paradoxes, those expectations that we as society place on women, that then we as women internalize, becomes our internal patriarchy, and we take them on ourselves. We're still in this space. I think what has shifted for me is, number one, a lot of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s are in midlife now. Yeah. And we're having an awakening, or have had an awakening, or are going through our heroine's journey and just saying, F this shit. I'm done with this. There has to be a better way. And we're talking about it. I wrote Getting Real about having it all because we weren't talking about it. We were never having a conversation about how challenging this is, being a working woman and all of the rest of it, and how we bring this together holistically. I do think that women coming up behind us have got this sorted better than we did. So that makes me very hopeful. And they also have this really interesting take on what I write about with those paradoxes. And like, they really get it in a way that there's no way I would have understood this when I was in my 20s, my 30s, even my late 30s. Wouldn't have had a clue what I was talking about. Now, I really seem to understand it. And that also makes me really hopeful.
I agree. I've got daughters in late 20s and early 30s. And I do think they've obviously learnt from the women like us who have come before them. But also there has been so much more conversation around all of this as they've been growing up. And so, yes, they have internalized still some of these paradoxes that I want to talk to you about in a moment. But they've also got this greater awareness, as you say, of what is happening. And there's a lot more kind of social awareness.
And there's good and bad around that, right? So, yeah, I've got a nearly 24-year-old son, and we are living in a different time, no question. We're in a completely different zeitgeist and cultural narrative about what it means to be a woman, what it means to be any gender. Like, we've come such a long way, what the world of work looks like. But then there's other pressures that we didn't have, like social media and comparison and mental health challenges and everything. So yes, we've come so far in so many of those ways. And there's a whole nother layer of things that pose incredible challenges for women.
Yeah, that's very true. Let's get on to talking about, you mentioned already about the number of paradoxes that you outline so beautifully in the book, and things like the success paradox, the motherhood paradox, the confidence paradox, and how we definitely internalize patriarchy. Can you talk a bit about the importance of these paradoxes and how it's important for us to understand them in order to then work out where we are with them and then make the next move, sort of thing?
Yes. Great question. Here's what I see from working with so many women, and the Women Rising program that I run, which is my main thing that I do. We've had nearly 10,000 women in the last 3.5 years in this program that I coach and work with directly. So that's a lot of women, 63 countries, all different cultures, ages, and stages. And here's what I witness. When we run into challenges as women, there's really only one thought that we have. It's my fault. It's me. There's something wrong with me, and that's why this thing has happened, particularly at work. We get talked over in a meeting, or we get passed over for a promotion, and we immediately think, oh, I'm not good enough, right? There's something wrong with me. And a big piece of this missing puzzle for all of us as women, doesn't matter whether you're a stay-at-home parent, whether you're at uni, whether you're in the workforce, whether you're a writer and working on your first novel, whatever it is, that we don't understand, for a lot of us, the external forces that shape our reality as women. And these are the paradoxes. And what I find is that, and it took me 15 years to really know enough and have seen enough and done, like I'm an academic as well, have done enough research to be able to deal with this underlying feeling I've had right back since my 30s of there has to be something more going on here. I was involved in the very first Male Champions of Change with Elizabeth Broderick, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, doing all these listening tours with CEOs and all of the women in organizations, thinking that if we just have enough conversations, we're going to figure it out. We're going to get the silver bullet. And then women will rise. They'll rise up in organizations and all the rest of it. And it didn't happen. And there is no silver bullet. And when I look back from where I sit now, like I've been trying to pull these pieces together for what are the things that we don't talk about in society, with our girlfriends, and particularly in our workplaces, that we have to understand to be able to move forward. And that's what the paradoxes are.
And I love the way that you explain it so clearly in the book, but then you go through all these kind of steps in how we can then take the next steps to pulling ourselves out of that mental space. I really love that about the book. You're not just explaining it, you're walking us through, okay, what do we do about it? And I love that.
Yes, so interesting you say that, because this book was going to be a really small manifesto. Like it was going to be, for anyone who's written a book or writing a book, you go through all these iterations, and it was going to be this really small hardcover manifesto. And it was just going to be part of the first section, and like about 30,000, 40,000 words. And as I was writing it, like I'm a teacher and a coach, I'm like, I can't just vomit out a problem and say, here's why the world's not working for women. And that's where all of still the steps, and then part 2, part 3 came into it. And it became like 93,000 words.
Wow. So let's take a little tangent onto the writing of the book,
Yes,
Megan.
please. My favorite.
This is your 4th nonfiction book.
Yeah.
So I haven't read the others, but it feels like it's like a culmination of everything that you've been thinking and experiencing and doing over the last 15 years or more. Where was the seeds for writing the actual book? Because you do have the Women Rising program. So which came first, the book or the program? And then how did you then go about developing the book from there?
It is a combination, and it also isn't. Like Simple, Soulful, Sacred is a really deeply soulful spiritual book for women. It's really thick, but it's 2 chapters, like 2 pages a chapter. It's like an oracle. But that was 2019. So I've been sitting with this book since then. And the program came first. So the program came out in 2020. And we're now with the Women Rising program in 700 organizations in 63 countries, plus individual women, like anyone can join us. The book is the next evolution. The book is the next step in the conversation of Women Rising. And where it started, like I knew there was another conversation that needed to happen. As I was saying, it took me quite a lot of years to really sit with what is going to add something different that hasn't been written, and that's not just going to be more noise, and that's going to be really, truly useful for women. And that took time to unfold. Yeah. What's the model, and what are the really important things of all of the things that could go in there that are essential? And I knew there was going to have inner critic work in there, and I knew they would have the tools like that part 3 with those really practical, how do you build a life vision, and how do you follow your purpose, and how do you build confidence? But it was that first section that I just grappled with and until I finally, when you land on something and just like, this is it, like this is the thing. And then it all just flowed.
And what was your writing process for actually getting the words on the page? Did you dedicate a certain period of time to it, or were you writing in between doing all the other many things that I imagine you do in your life?
Yeah, no, I'm a founder and a CEO. So I run my company to Megan Dalla-Camina and Women Rising. So I was doing what so many of us do as writers, right? Like I was just stealing the moments. Like, where's the space? We sold the book really quickly, and I didn't think that was what was going to happen. And then we put a really tight deadline on it because we're in this zeitgeist moment around this topic. I found that I was much more effective if I gave myself a full day. Forget it. Like I just dilly-dally around. So I would give myself like blocks. You've got 3 hours here, and this is what you're going to write. Go. And I did that. I write in Scrivener. I don't know if you...
me too. Yeah, I love Scrivener.
So I would like literally give myself an assignment, not sitting, what do I feel like writing today? Tomorrow, you're going to sit down, you're going to write this. So that for me worked really well amongst, like running a scaling company. Yeah. And I wrote most of it in 6 months.
That's amazing, because it's quite a chunky tome, and there's a lot in there. As you say, you had the 2nd and 3rd section, you knew what vaguely was going to go in there when you started, but there's so much that you are drawing on from all your research and your experience and your work with women. There would be so much that you're drawing on. To be able to narrow it down into putting it between 2 covers must have been quite difficult.
It was really difficult, and there were a lot more words that as we all do, that don't end up in the book.
Yeah.
One of my books was 164,000 words I wrote, and it came down to 84, the Simple, Soulful, Sacred one. I really just lasered in on what are the most important things, because there is so much. Like when I write about the tools, there's 6 key things that I think are incredibly important. So they're the chapters in that section. With the inner critic part 2, which is what I teach so much of for women, because it's women's number one issue that they self-declare that holds them back, is this voice inside our heads. So I wanted to write about like my teachings around that and the stories around that, but then I wanted to go deeper. And that's where the archetypes came in. And when I hit on the 13 archetypes, I was like Googling, like archetypes of the inner critic, thinking someone has to have done this before. Didn't exist.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm onto something here. And then it was about what's the structure and like, how is this helpful and how do we unpack this, and bringing those spiritual elements in of affirmations and other things that I hold really dear. So yeah, like sifting and crafting. I had a brilliant editor at Wiley who gave me some not massive amounts of notes, but really important targeted notes that made me sit back and go, oh, okay, and just made the book so much better. I found that with this being my 4th book, this process of surrender to the art and just the guidance that comes through, and then, okay, pick that up and go to work, rather than really trying to control all of the elements, is just giving that space for the creation and the evolution. And that really served me with this book.
Fantastic. One of the things that you talked about is the inner critic, and this comes out of it a lot in the book because you do deal with it in the archetypes section, and I really want to get on to those archetypes in a moment. But when you talked about imposter syndrome in the book, this is something that I feel obviously women, and as a woman writer and someone who talks to a lot of women writers, it's often a question, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? We all suffer from it. And it's funny, I know amongst my own writing friends, whenever we've got a bit of a dilemma, like particularly around things like if you're teaching a workshop, how much to charge, or how to put yourself forward for some publicity or promotion. So we've got this bit of a joke in my writing group now. What would, and I won't say his name, but a certain male writer who is lovely, but we all say, I'll make up a name. What would Tom do? What would Tom say, as a kind of way to go, yeah, stop it. What would Tom say? I'm going to do that. But this whole thing around imposter syndrome, obviously it affects women across all fields, but in creative fields, it can really become a serious kind of block to whatever creative endeavor, whether that's a book or art or whatever it is we're doing. In your writing of this book and in your research and everything, do you think there's any way around imposter syndrome for writers, for example?
Yeah. And it's not just imposter syndrome, right? Like the imposter is one of the archetypes of the inner critic. There's 13. And if I had a coaching conversation with a number of your friends in your circle and really started to dig around, it may be imposter, may not be. Maybe something else. Maybe it's the perfectionist, or maybe it's the people pleaser, or maybe it's the comparer. Yeah. Or maybe there's something else going on. Like imposter is absolutely one where we think I'm not qualified. They're going to find out that I'm a fraud and I'm going to get tapped on the shoulder and kicked out of the literary world, whatever that is. That's the imposter. But there are also other archetypes that really feed into, particularly as creatives, that feed into the belief that I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, someone else has already done it, I'm never going to get it done or get published, or no one's going to buy it. Like they're all inner critic stories.
Yeah.
So the work, and like this section would be really helpful for all of the writers here, is to start to understand, what is your inner critic voice? What is the voice in your head? Where does it come from? Sometimes you will find, oh, that voice is actually my mother, or that voice is actually that 7th grade teacher. What are the dimensions of that voice? And then what are the stories that you tell yourself? And then use the steps to work through to come out the other side. We're never going to silence our inner critic. That is not our goal. And I think some people believe that we can make it go away. It's if you're a meditator, I'm a deep meditator, deep meaning a deep practice, not always deep meditation.
Yeah.
We're going to silence our thoughts and clear our mind. Like, we're not going to do that in meditation. It may get quieter. It's not going to stop. So that's a big part of this work around the inner critic is catch the stories that you're telling yourself, learn to challenge those stories and interrupt the cognitive dissonance, and then get to the reframe so that you can take the action that you want to take. That's the guts of the inner critic work. And it does get better. Like my inner critic used to be, at least scream at me, like all day, every day, so loud, so negative, so harsh. And over the last, I would say 12 years doing this work, evolutions of this work that I teach and write about, my inner critic is very quiet. And now when I hear it, it's very clear what it is. And I know exactly what to do about it. So like it does get quieter and easier, and we build our confidence as we go.
Yeah, I love that. We can have a number of different inner critics operating within us at any one time, can't we?
We can. So there's 13 archetypes, and I find that I've been having this conversation with a lot of women since the book's come out. There may be 2 or 3 that you go, oh, that's me.
Yeah. I went through with a pen and I was asterisk, that's me. Oh, no, hang on, that's me. No.
Yes. And then maybe, and sometimes we'll look at it and we'll go, oh, like for me, I used to be the people pleaser. I'm not a people pleaser anymore because I've done so much work on removing that. And I can catch it really easily. Like I'm the overachiever. Like that's me. I'm also the empath. And like I have tools to manage that. So yes, there may be 2 or 3 that you think, oh yes. And then when you really go in, there may be one that just leaps out and goes, for me in this season of my life,
yeah,
this is my main inner critic archetype.
I think that's interesting that you say in this season of my life too, because I have found when I was looking at all those inner critic archetypes, I could recognize them, some as being louder at different parts of my life, and maybe some now that I'm a little bit older, a lot older, are not as vocal.
Yes. Yeah. And it can be like going into different seasons. If you're going into a season of being a writer, or you're going into a season of writing your next book, watch your inner critic come up. Like you watch that thing. If you're launching a book, watch your inner critic come up. If you are transitioning into midlife, going through menopause, like whatever it is, whatever season you're in, your inner critic will have a flavor. And when we can really understand that, when we can detach emotionally from that, and we do that by catching the stories, like just write down, think about a moment that's happened for you in the last 2 weeks where you felt your inner critic flare up. Just sit down for 10 minutes, write down what was the internal narrative that was going on with you in that period. That's step 1. Step 1 is catch the story. Step 2 is ask, is that true? Because we need to challenge the narrative. Like we believe the 60,000 thoughts we have a day, right? And they stop us in our tracks. So yeah, we get to challenge that story and then we can get to the action.
So that journaling practice is really important, isn't it?
Yeah. And look, some people, I'm not a journaler. Like I'm not a big journaler, but I like to write things down. So if you can see my desk, this is so pretty. This is like creative chaos. I'll jot things down on a notepad, or I'll pop them on a note on my phone, or I'll just I have these little Indian journals. I spend a lot of time in India. And so it doesn't need to be I'm going to sit down and journal for 10 pages every day. It doesn't need to be that. Don't put that pressure on yourself. Just jot things down on a piece of paper. And yeah, if you can have them in one place so you can go back to them, great. But it doesn't need to be any fancy process.
Fabulous. I loved that archetype section of the book because it did really pull out all those different inner critic archetypes. But it also talks about with each archetype, you talk about the kind of positive aspects of that too. Like you mentioned being an empath, that's a fantastic quality and it's great. But obviously it's not so great when it tips us over into other areas that are not so healthy for us.
Yeah.
But I love the way you outlined both sides of those archetypes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm an eternal optimist, right? I'm also a realist and a pragmatist. So looking at the light side and then the shadow side of, if you're a perfectionist, The light side of the perfectionist is that you are going to have incredible attention to detail. You are going to always deliver. Like, there are real benefits to being a perfectionist. And then there's the shadow side of that, and how that can undermine us. Same for the overachiever. As an overachiever, light side, get shit done, make an impact, do great things. The shadow side, burn yourself out, burn everybody else out. Because you're like, let's go. That's mine. Know thyself. So light side, shadow side, and then everyone has their own strategies, which are all nuanced. And I also really how they all go into, where does this come from?
Yeah.
How are women cultivated as perfectionist, or the beauty queen, or the ideal mother, and that link back to the paradoxes?
Oh yeah, that kind of web that you create where you can really see all the connections is fantastic. And as a matter of fact, brilliant for us as women, but as writers, my eyes just lit up when I saw those things, because this is fantastic. Writers, anyone listening out there, for creating characters, there is so much in this book I am going to be using.
Oh, yes.
Because this is everything that we talk about to do with the psychology of our characters. I've just recently taught a workshop on climbing inside your character's skin, where I talked about the psychology of character and how our kind of childhood wounds and things like that, and the things that we absorb as we're growing up and from our environment. So all these things, about character flaws and
this
the
is
light.
a textbook.
Yes, the light and dark side of it. It's like it's all in here, guys. It's fantastic.
Oh, I'd never even thought about that before from that perspective. Oh, good. I'm glad it's helpful.
Yeah. Fantastic for character creation for fiction authors, I'm telling you.
I love that. Oh, I envy fiction authors. I wish I was a fiction author sometimes.
You never know, Megan. You
never know.
The other thing that you've mentioned a couple of times, and which is also something that I've come across in my writing life, because it's often brought up as a kind of structural template for plot, is the heroine's journey. But you've talked about this in relation, of course, to our actual real life journeys. So can you talk a little bit about that and how integral that has been to you pulling all this together?
Yeah, so the heroine's journey, credit to Maureen Murdoch. So she's a Jungian analyst and psychotherapist who created that model and she, back in the day, worked with Joseph Campbell and when he was doing the hero's journey, and she said, I feel this is really limiting for women. This doesn't speak to women's journeys. And Campbell said to her, it's inherent, because the feminine's the place everyone's trying to get to. And she said, I dismiss that. And she went and created the heroine's journey, which is specific to our lives and our journeys and our psychology as women. That factored quite heavily in my book, Simple, Soulful, Sacred, my book before this one. But it just informs everything I do. It informs my view of, and I'm very fascinated by Jung and all of that work, and all of the other writers, Marion Woodman and others. But this essence of a woman's journey and how different it is to a man's journey, and how we honor that, that's like a core foundation of my work and this book, even if it's a bit less obvious. It's like that thread, right, that goes. And my PhD that I'm doing right now, it's all interwoven in everything that I do.
What would you say are the key differences between the heroine's journey and the hero's journey?
Yeah, that's such a good question. One of the things with the hero's journey is it's all about out there. It's the boon of success and the trial. And you think about any of the movies, right? We have current status, and then we go through this, men do, not we, go through this challenge and then come out the other side, mostly with all of the boons of success. A lot of that's very outward. For women and the heroine's journey, it's about going inwards. And it's about the way that Maureen Murdoch writes it is we start here and then we come around the circle, and we're going through phases like disconnecting from the feminine, aligning ourselves with the masculine, the external world. And then often this sort of, whatever you want to call it, this dark night of the soul, where we realize, well, we may have gotten external success, from aligning ourselves with the masculine. This was my journey, but we've completely diminished our soul and we've lost our feminine energy and essence in the process. So as we come out the other side of that heroine's journey is that reclamation of the feminine, which is such a big part of my work. And then on it goes. So
Amazing.
that really deep inner journey of reclaiming our core essence as women, as the feminine, that society so often, certainly patriarchy, says there's no place for this. The place for this is look pretty, have babies, and you're like, we're done with you. So that, yeah, claiming the feminine, reclaiming that.
It is a great kind of structural thing for fiction writing as well.
Yes.
If you've got again, going back to that, your female protagonist character and looking at who they are at the beginning of the story, and then using that kind of heroine's journey structure to get them back to that essence and have them tapping into those gifts that they already hold, sort of thing. And that's something, Megan, actually, I was just reading the acknowledgements and stuff last night at the end of the book. Something you write right at the end of the book, which is in the epilogue. It says, while it seems that we have come to the end of our journey together, it's not really the end, obviously the end of the book. As with all heroines' journeys, this is only the beginning. Our paths as women are circular, not linear, ever winding and twisting as we unfold into who we are meant to be. We don't become a new and improved person on this path. The essence and purpose of our lives as women is not to become, it's to remember. As we unshackle ourselves from who the world has told us to be, we return home to who we truly are. And that, I just got goosebumps again reading that now. It's just so profound and so important.
Thank you. That epilogue is one of the favorite things I've ever written.
I bet. Yeah, I could see why. It's full of wisdom. It was really, really good. Loved it.
Thank you.
Now, I am conscious the time is ticking on, but I just wanted to ask a couple of quick things. First of all, the Women Rising program that we've referenced a few times, you said you operate that on a corporate level, but also for individuals. So how would people tap into that, and what is it all about?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So the Women Rising program is, we call it holistic personal and professional development. So it looks at 8 core areas from your life vision and your purpose, how to build what I call radical confidence, the building blocks for career success. Doesn't really matter what your career is, but like building blocks that we need to do that. We go deep into elements of well-being around physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being, things like how to set boundaries, grit and grace, like how to build the grit for your long-term hard goals, writers, essential.
Yes, I agree.
And then how to lead change. So it is this beautiful, it's a 4-month live virtual program with live coaching as well.
Okay.
We have a cohort of women. Usually we have about 1,000 women globally. It's all self-paced curriculum, so you do all the modules in your own time, and then we gather. So beautiful community. We do live coaching calls with me that cover all time zones, where we get together and we unpack these things. We unpack the inner critic, and we unpack your life vision and your purpose and meaning and confidence, and we coach on it. So it's an incredible 4-month journey. So we have organizations that send women. We have a lot of women who join themselves, and we run it in March and September every year.
Fantastic. Do you think there's any age limit to doing that program? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, asking for a friend. You're so cute. All ages, all stages, all different types. It's, the thing that women say most often about it is that it's life-changing, which I was surprised. I thought it's career changing and leadership and all. Like it's a very personal journey.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm going to put all the links for everything into the show notes so everybody can access that there if you're listening. How has the kind of promotional side of all this been going for you? Because fitting it into your already busy schedule must be difficult, but how are you liking the promotion for the book?
It's been great. I've got a beautiful publicist and she's been divine, and we wanted to go with a podcast strategy. So we've had a lot of publicity. We're weekly this month, beautiful big write-up review. Like we've been in Forbes, and we've got stuff coming up with Mary Claire. There's been a lot of media. Right. But what I really wanted to do was I wanted to do a podcast publicity strategy, because I just love the conversation. Like, I'm all about
Yeah.
the conversation, and I want to get deeper in, like, why does this matter? How is it helpful, rather than just sound bites on morning radio? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I've been really happy, and we're just starting the US publicity now. So we've been very focused on Australia-based publicity, and the book's just been released this week in the US. So like, we'll be in Fast Company, and there's all of this other work that's about to start. But yeah, it's been nice. I just wanted it to have some grace, rather than just that sense of hustle that you can get when you launch something.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel aligned to what it is. And we've certainly had some of that, because we run a business, we're launching a book. I've just started my PhD. Like, there's all of these pieces going on. So just trying to stay grounded and balanced and do the things that will matter, rather than just feel like you've got to go and get, like, it used to be about column inches, right? I couldn't give a shit. It's about, like, where are the meaningful conversations where we can start to shift the conversation. And that's been beautiful.
Amazing. Now, I have got one more question I want to ask you, which is about the tools that you recommend in the final section of the book. But that question is going to be a very special segment for the Substack listeners. So anybody out there that wants to hear that, you'll have to sign up on Substack. Megan, it's been so lovely chatting. And as I said, I just found this book inspiring and helpful. And I know it's something I'm going to go back to many times over. So highly recommend it for all the listeners out there. And as I said, fantastic writing tool as well.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Pamela. I've loved our conversation.
Yeah, great chatting. Thanks, Megan. So that was an amazing chat with Megan Dalla-Camina. Megan and I just could have talked all day. And in fact, after I pressed stop on the recording, we were just chatting about how great it was to talk about all this, particularly in regards to writing. And she said, oh, I'd love to do a chat about relating all this to the writer's mind. We're already in the process of scheduling that chat. So watch out for part 2 with Megan Dalla-Camina. I'm doing the interview with her in early December. It's going to be all about applying all of this stuff we've been talking about on archetypes, imposter syndrome, inner critic, all of that on the writer's mind with Megan Dalla-Camina. I already can't wait to do that interview. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that chat. And if you do want to hear the additional little bit where I spoke to Megan about the tools we need to employ in order to take us to the next level of who we want to be, and sign up as a Substack supporter, you can go to Substack, Writes for Women, writes for with the number 4.substack.com. And if you go onto there, you will find a section where you can sign up as a paid subscriber, and there are loads of bonuses and we're adding to them all the time. So you can hear more from Megan as a Substack paid subscriber. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Have a great day. It's very cold and windy and wet here in the Illawarra, and I am off to do some more editing.